Hi and welcome to the 2023 December update from Dean Park Model Railway. It feels like ages since I brought you up to date with what I've been working on, but in that time I've not been sitting on my hands, as I've been working flat out on major upgrades, as you'll see in this video. So what have I been doing since the last time? Well, I've undertaken and completed a series of major upgrades and additions, which include brand new overhead masts and wires around the entire lower main line, including through the station. I've also added more details which include litter, new signage and tiny lineside cabling. All these enhancements now take the details at the station to an even higher level than they were before. I also take a quick look at the new Hornby TTA tank wagons that arrived last week in a Dean Park rapid review. If you have any comments or questions, please post those below. If you're on social media, why not join me there on the Dean Park Station closed Facebook group, or look me up on Twitter or Instagram. This way you get sneaky peeks at what I'm working on in between videos, as well as joining my Dean Park community. One of the main challenges, I suppose, in the upgrade of the station was the installation of the PECO mast, and in particular the overhead PECO wire system. I'm building it into a layout that's already completed, and I've got to take into account bridges, tunnels, and in particular this large station roof. In this station upgrade, I'll be taking you through some of the tasks that I've done in a step-by-step fashion and showing you updates as I go. I'll also be going further afield, around to the east side of the layout, where I've also been fitting the new PECO catenary system. I'm going to start the upgrades at the east end of the station, and as you could probably see between the grey lineside hut there and the signal, I've fitted a new PECO mast. This is sitting on the same foundations as the old Dapple one. The second mast is fitted just at the right hand side of the British Airways billboard there. However, there's a bit of a problem. The spacing isn't exact to the PECO wire system. The PECO wires for this area would probably be a 380 or a 340mm wire. This is sitting around about 360. I could always trim the 380 one, however I've also got a problem with that in itself, because when I put the wire over the two masts and ran a loco with a pantograph under it, the wire got to the very edge of the pantograph as the loco goes round the curve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out the mast at the British Airways billboard and fit two masts in its place, spaced a bit closer together to allow the wire to stay central over the rail and therefore the pantograph, and it also lines up the final mast perfectly for fitting the wires under the station roof. Okay, that's me now removed this mast, and I've placed one of these OHLE jigs at the base of that mast and using this kind of cut out end here. These two grooves running along the jig, these clip into the rails, and what they do is they ensure that the distance from the outer rail to the base of the mast is correct, and that in turn ensures that the contact wires from the arm of the mast run in the middle of the rails to make contact with the pantograph. What I then did was I took one of the PECO wires, in this case a 260mm one, and at the end of each wire there's a small hook, and these hook round this little nib in the middle of the jig there. The second one is then placed in position, again with the wire hooked round the end. In this case I've chopped it in half to clear the edge of the platform there, and this one here has the hole facing out from the track, and that's where I'm going to draw the hole for the next mast, which is 260mm from the other one, and in a range to fit the PECO wire system. Okay, here's the next two in the chain. This is just for demonstration purposes. What I'm going to do before I fit this one is I'm going to make sure I fit the mast here, and then use the cutout end of the jig to locate at the bottom of that mast. But this distance here, in order to keep the wire in between the two tracks, is 200, so I'm using the shortest of the PECO wires. And apologies if the picture's not the greatest quality here. I've got a little bit extra light shining down on it here to try and brighten it up, but into this area of the layout it's a little bit duller. So as you can see, the wire, the pip, is hooking on both ends of the wire there, and this contact wire there is at least 2mm from the edge of the rail edge, so I know that the pantograph is going to make contact with that when it's fitted. I'm initially going to go in here with a 3mm drill through the actual jig into the baseboard and through that. Then I'll clear the area of undergrowth before fitting the mast sitting on its concrete plinth. You may have noticed that when I drilled that last hole, I had a bit of a contraption attached to the end of my drill. And this is a pin vise with the 3mm drill bit in it, and the pin vise is in the chuck of the drill. And the reason I did that was that I needed clearance, so when I could drill the hole, the top and the side of the wall weren't getting damaged by the rotating part of the drill here around the chuck. And this just allows me clearance and a little bit extra length to my otherwise shorter 3mm drill bit. So a nice little idea for lengthening your drill bit if you need to get into an area that's rather awkward. With these masts now in position and the wires being prepared, it's time for me to remove the station roof so I can fit more masts and wires right the way through the station and join up with the OHLE system at the other end of the station. For this, it's a very simple process. The roof is in two parts, and I'll just go underneath the baseboard and disconnect the wires for the lighting before lifting them out of position, and that'll give me full access to all of the platforms and the track work, which currently is hidden underneath the roof. With the roof now removed, it gives a total different look to the station. It's actually quite a long station. It can cater for an 8-car HST without any problems on two of the platforms. When installing the PECO masts, I had to move the position of some of them, especially around the curve here, to cater for the wire system. Now, if you've got wires going from mast to mast, these wires have to stay within the tracks. Obviously, if they're out width, they'll come off the side of the pantograph of the loco, and it wouldn't be very realistic. So I had to manoeuvre and move some of the masts which were already here and add in some more into the ballasted area. This was one of the masts that I had to put in place, and for that I had to cut away the ballast that was already there. How I did that was I took the 4mm base that I made from MDF, which I'd painted in Precision Paints weathered concrete, and I placed it in the position that I needed it. I then marked out the edges with the Stanley blade before then chiselling out the ballast that was already there to leave a nice clear square base. I then fitted my laser cut base into there before feeding the mast through and tightening from underneath using the washer and small screw. That mast is now firmly secured in position to take the PECO wires. There were a couple of occasions that where I'd moved the old mast, I had to fill in the ballast with some new detail. I could have just ballasted it, but it might have looked a bit patchy. So what I've done is I've used these scale model scenery trackside drainage manholes, and what I've done is I've just placed one in there tentatively just now. I'll paint one up and I'll weather it, and I'll show you that in the next clip. I'll then place that in position, and I'll use some of the ballast that's been dug out from the other areas to just gently feather that around the edges to blend it in. This is the track drainage side kit that I'm using from Scale Model Sceneries. You can get this on the website, and the link to that is in the description below. For this you get some rectangular manhole kind of surrounds, and you also get a couple of the round ones, and I've used these previously on my depot. What you get is you get 10 covers, and all I did with the actual surround was I primed it and painted it in precision weather concrete. These have been painted in sleeper grime from Rail Match. Both of these paints are enamels. What I then did was I brushed it over with some weathering powders, and what I've got here is the cover that I've detached, and you'll notice that just sits nicely in there when you line it up. You'll notice that it's slightly more rusted look than the bare sleeper grime. For that I just used some weathering powders from Tamiya in light rust colours, just brushed over with a sponge and a small brush, and it just gives the oxidisation effect that I'm looking for. After all, it's a drain cover, it's going to get rusty, they weren't painted in real life. I'm now going to position that in the hole left by the mast at the station. When designing the wires to go under the road bridges and into the tunnels, I had to adapt the PECO system in order for the wires to fit and make adequate clearance with the top of the tunnel. In this case, I've got a wire here that I'll show you. I'll take you through how to alter the PECO wire system. As you can see there, I've narrowed the distance from the top to the bottom wire, and that means doing a bit of trimming and soldering. This particular one will go into the tunnel at the bottom of the incline at the east of the station. As you can see there, I've got this kind of adapted end here with the tape on it just now, and that will actually hook onto the roof of the tunnel. And the reason I've done that is so I don't have to continue the wires all the way through the tunnel, because you'll not see them anyway, but it still gives a realistic look of the wires disappearing out of view. So I'll take you through some stages of that, and I'll show you the finished article in position on the layout. This is the standard wire at the top here. What I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to reduce the height of the top wire there, and what I've done is I've taken some wire cutters there and I've just cut the upright tensioners, and I'm going to reduce that from a distance of 12 down to just over 6, and that will allow the top wire to clear the tunnel as it goes into the tunnel. I'll then adjust the other ones to keep it equally as thin before manipulating the end of the wire here to hook onto the tunnel. First I'll just adjust the bend here so it's allowed to go down. As you can see, then it allows the wire to fall lower between the two tensioning uprights. After I've done that, you can always manipulate that after. After I've done that, I'm going to tape it in position. Now I'm going to measure the distance between the two wires there and set them in position. I said just over 6. Like so. What I've got to do now is I've got to tape that in position. Okay, I'm going to take a little bit of flux now. I'm going to use proper flux this time, not my flux pen. This has got the added benefit of it sticks the two wires together in position so they don't move. But the downside to this is you've got to clean it with a hot soapy cloth or sponge afterwards to stop it corroding. I'm now going to take the soldering iron with a little bit of solder on the end and just hold it in place and let the solder do the work. There. That can now be washed down and the excess wire trimmed off the top. You might be thinking what that is. That's just a heat-proof board. Stops marking my workstation, or indeed the cork tends to burn a little bit. So yeah, I just got myself a little heat-proof tile. This is the mast that I'm going to use under the bridge. As you can see, I've just chopped off one of the PECO masts and I've added some brackets at the back there, and you could maybe just see the small bolt holes in them as well. That'll be fixed to the brickwork, pretty much just like in real life. Engineers had to work around the existing structures, and sometimes they were bolted to brickwork or structural parts of the railway, such as station walls, etc. You'll also notice that the distance between the lower arm and the upper arm here has been reduced from the standard mast. It used to come out where that insulator is, but I detached it and then resoldered it before filing down the small mark that was left, and I've just placed that insulator over it to hide it. That is to allow the contact here with the wire not to tangle up with the pantograph of the loco as it goes under the bridge. Obviously there's less clearance here, so I've had to make allowances for that. This will be trimmed just like all the masts, and I've not even painted the top bit there. That's because I'm going to solder wires onto there. There's actually going to be 3 wires getting fitted to this one mast, one coming from the station and then 2 coming out the other side, as one goes under the tunnel to the incline and the other continues on the lower main line. So it's been a pretty big engineering headache for me, pretty much like the real railway. Having to make do with the structures that are already there and work around them. There's the wire now in position, all completed. It's attached to the manipulated arm that goes underneath the bridge here that I showed you earlier, and it's hooked onto the roof of the tunnel, and I've actually used a cable tie mount for this, and the wire just slides through the hole there, so if I need to remove it at any point I can. I say it's hooked onto the other end, but it's not fixed in place permanently, so if I do need to get in there for any maintenance, I can actually move this particular wire. The rest are all soldered in place. There you'll see it from another angle. There you can see the 2 wires going in under the road bridge, and one will come out the other end to go into the station area. This was the most challenging part of the wiring so far, to get that fitting under the bridge. It's not the easiest to access. I was actually laying a mirror on the track and then working in reflection to try and mount the arm onto the wall and then fit the wires onto the arm. So it really, it gave me weeks of thought and engineering to get that all done, but I'm quite proud that I managed to get this done and looking realistic. That's the wires now painted and hung in position. They're not fixed yet, and I'll show you in the next clip how I'm going to achieve that. These wires are painted in Humbrol 32, which is a dark grey, and before I did that, however, I covered them in etch primer, and that allows the paint to stick to the cabling without it flaking off in the future. Those are the wires now in position. You'll notice that I've scraped the paint off the end of the wires where they go through the top hole and where they hook around on the registration arm at the bottom. This is so I can put the flux and then expect the solder to flow and create a strong joint. If I tried to do that with a painted surface, the solder would not work. In the PECO video regarding the OHLE, they just painted the wires once they'd been fixed onto the masts. However, I didn't really fancy going around the whole layout with a tiny little brush and trying to get a good finish onto a tiny thin wire. So that's why I went down the aerosol prime and then airbrushed the Humbrol 32 before bringing them to the layout. It gives a much better finish, and for the sake of a little extra time with the obviously preparation, it's going to pay dividends when it's all finished. After you've soldered, I get some hot soapy water. I've just got some fairy liquid and water here, and I'm just going to clean the solder area to get rid of any flux residue which could corrode over time. This will give it a nice clean joint. I'm now going to be taking the enamel grey number 32 and just patching in any area of the wire that I've had to scrape the paint off in order to get it to solder, just to give a nice clean wire and connection to the mast and the arm. Like it or not, litter is a part of the modern world we live in. Some people just can't be bothered putting things in the bin. Dean Park has until now escaped masses of litter. However, what I've done whilst I've had the roof off and doing the upgrades is I've added some scale model sceneries litter to the buffer stop areas and in around the sides of the platforms. As you can maybe see here, next to the buffer stop, I've got newspapers, there's even tiny discarded tickets, crisp packets, and just general rubbish that's been thrown onto the line or on the platform, and the wind has accumulated it in the corners at the buffer stops. Here on platform 3 we've got some more discarded tickets, leaflets, crisp packets, newspapers and general rubbish. This being the east end of the station, in this country the prevailing wind is mainly from the west, so down the east end of the station is where all the rubbish will mainly accumulate. The undergrowth at the east end of the station doesn't escape the litter either. As you can see beside the hut there, some newspapers and general rubbish just accumulating in the long grass and the bushes. And just to finish, these are the bay platforms number 4 and 5 at Dean Park, and I've added some more litter in as well that's been discarded by the careless commuter. Before I put the litter onto the layout from the scale model series sheet, I just brushed it down and toned it down a little bit with some weathering powders. This gives the creation that it's not just fresh litter that's been dropped, some of it might have been there for some time. Obviously you could vary it. I've got a couple of bits of fresh litter down there as well. You just don't want to have it all totally clean, because then obviously it detracts from the realism of the litter itself. This is a view that's not really afforded to many people, and this is in the actual station itself that's usually covered by the overall roof. You've got 6 platforms in total. The 2 bay platforms in front of you are bay platforms 4 and 5, with the electrified main line at the back there being platform 6. Platforms 4 and 5 are designed to take ScotRail Express 5-coach trains push-pulled by a class 47-7, but they can also obviously take DMUs and local hauled services as well. All platform signage has been designed and made by me, along with some kits from 10 Commandments in the way of platform chairs, and at the very back there you'll see some scenecraft buildings in the shape of a cafe and a ticket kiosk. Last Christmas I got this small ticket kiosk, and it's part of the Bachmann Scenecraft range. Until now I've had nowhere to put it, but what I'm going to do is just put it here at platform 6, and the ticket collector there can check your tickets before you go onto the platform. It's a nice little kit actually. It's open bottomed, so you might want to put some crew or some station staff in there to collect the tickets. You could use it as an information kiosk as well. It doesn't have to be for checking of the passengers' tickets. And it's finished off there with a nice white double arrow on the side. Really good kit. I'd recommend this one from the Bachmann Scenecraft range. Part of the upgrades to the station were to replace the signage, and I've done that. An example here at the East End is a prototypically coloured red and blue ScotRail Welcome to Dean Park sign. Those of you who are familiar with Edinburgh Waverley, back in the day when you came into Edinburgh, you were greeted with similar signs that were mounted on the walls at the station. I've also listened to feedback, and I've replaced the small lowercase r with a ScotRail capital R to make it more authentic of the period. Platform signage at Dean Parks also had an upgrade with the new authentic light blue and white banded station name signs. These were commonplace around the ScotRail network into the 80s and into the 1990s, and I've adopted that here at Dean Park. The kit itself was a modified Model Scenes modern station sign kit, and I've shortened the legs and also modified the white backboard ever so slightly to fit my ScotRail signs. As I mentioned at the top of the video, I've been doing some lineside cabling upgrades, similar to those that I did at the depot when I did the scenic work on that last year. And this involves taking some jeweler's wire, which is single core, so you can manipulate it into the shape you want. It comes enamelled with a gloss black finish, and what I've done is I've toned it down with some matte black and sleeper grime from the Rail Match enamels range. What I then do is I get it into the correct shape that I want and trim it and easily snip it with some scissors or small wire cutters, and then just put a dab of glue at each end and place it in position next to the signal, next to the line side point heater, or wherever I've got cabling weaving its way around the network. Okay, it's not going to be 100% authentic as per the real world. We're just adding a representation here of lineside cabling. I don't profess to be a permanent way electrical engineer. I'm just a modeller trying to add a little bit more detail to the line side. Here you can hopefully see 3 turnouts, one at the left hand side of the screen, one in the middle, and one just hiding behind the speed restriction sign there. And they've all got the cabling coming from the back of the point motors and into the cable trunking, or in some cases on the one in the middle there, the cabling goes down under the ballast. So I've just basically drilled a little hole in the ballast, or 2 little holes, and then fed the cabling from the back of the point meter, arced it down so it's giving the impression that it's disappearing under the ballast. You might also be able to see the point heaters have got small cables coming from them, and that's again just to the point blades of the turnout to give again a representation of the cabling on the real thing. I've also upgraded a couple of trees at the Dean Park Garden side of the layout next to the station. The tree on the left is a silver birch tree, and that's from Primo Trees. I really think his trees are market leading, they're good value for money, and they're so realistic. I'll show you another one I've added as well further down the gardens. This is a Primo spruce tree. I replaced a damaged tree that I had here already. I really like the way that he's done these trees. The needles and the way they hang on the branches are just spot on. And he's always upgrading and developing his skills with regard to his product. This new spruce tree looks just a little bit better than the Primo spruce trees I bought, say, a couple of years ago. Here are a few more examples of the Primo trees. At the far left and the far right there are his larch trees, and the one at the centre right there is one of his mighty oaks. In all trees, in all ranges, he does various sizes, depending on what scale, what age of tree you're looking for, and indeed what your budget is. Obviously, the bigger the tree, the more expensive, because the more time that he has to spend hand making them. Which is fair enough, and you don't mind paying for quality, and Primo trees certainly do give you that quality. And finally, with regard to some street furniture, I've added these West Hill Wagon Works 3D printed public waste bins around about the car park area and onto the street scene just outside the station. These were painted in a satin black before masking off and painting on a very thin gold line all the way around the bin, and these kind of replicate the ones found in cities across the country. This, along with other 3D printed kits, can be found at the West Hill Wagon Works website. If you want to check that out, the link to that is in the description below. In this rapid review, I take a quick look at the all-new Hornby TTA tank wagon, which was announced back in January as part of the 2023 announcements, and to Hornby's credit, it's arrived with retailers on time. I wasn't originally going to get any of these new wagons, but when I saw a video of them running up the West Highland line in the 80s in a Speedlink service, I decided that I'd get a few. I've gone for the earlier version in the ESO livery with end ladders, as opposed to the other versions Hornby have released, which have side ladders. Straight out of the box they impress. The painted finish and printing on these is first class. In fact, it's flawless. The paint edges are sharp and the smallest printed details are readable under a magnifying glass. Hornby have only released one of each wagon, so all the running numbers are the same. And that's a shame, and they should have taken a leaf out of other companies' books by releasing multiple running numbers, or even multi-packs. It's also a pity Hornby limited the allocation to some retailers. Even my local Hornby Tier 1 retailer was allocated 3 of the ESO ones and was unable to get any more. These have proved popular, so hopefully Hornby do another run in 2024. They really should. Anyway, back to the model. It's got all the detail you'd expect from a new wagon, including all the underframe detail and pipework. The young designer charged with producing the TTA really has done himself proud. Okay, I'm sure there are compromises somewhere, but looking at the wealth of detail under the wagon, I am rather impressed. It also has quality feeling metal sprung buffers. Honestly, this is a great product and shows Hornby, with the right factory, can produce market leading rolling stock. It's too tight a space for kinematic couplers, but any end pockets are fitted, and this will allow close coupling if choosing some magnetic connectors from the likes of Hunt couplers. The model has turn metal wheels, which gives it superb free running and no unwanted movement as the wagon goes along. Each wagon comes with a detailing pack of pipework and an end of train tail lamp that modellers may wish to fit. Hornby have incorporated fine brass etch parts to this wagon, including the grid platform at the top and the etched end ladders. It's all beautifully assembled with no signs of glue or ill-fitting parts. I'll now show you some more running shots of it on the layout. I've got 8 of these so far, but might try to add 1 or 2 more. However, they ran in Speedlink services, so 2 or 3 can easily be mixed up with other freight. Well, that's all I've got for you in this episode. I hope you enjoyed seeing the station upgrades. Next month I hope to be back at the West End project with more scenic work being done around the incline section. However, before then, keep an eye out for the Dean Park Model of the Year video and my long awaited full Dean Park layout tour. This is a video that's often requested by some of you, so it's about time I gave you an updated look at the entire layout. In the meantime, thanks for watching, have a Merry Christmas and cheers for now.